So you're struggling with the ablative absolute. Well, you're going to have to figure it out because it's a construction that is very common in Latin literature. So you'll recognize an ablative absolute because, number one, it'll be ablative. So you've got to know your ablative endings. You have to know your singular and plural ablative endings, and you really do need to know them for all declensions. But if you're looking just at part of the ablative absolute, you can focus on just a few of them, and I'll explain that in a minute. So first of all, you have to know that it's ablative. Second of all, most ablative absolutes contain a participle. So what you're going to be looking for in your Latin sentence, usually it's at the beginning, and usually you'll have a noun and you'll have a participle, and you might have some other words in there as well, but that's usually going to be what you see. And then you'll have the rest of the sentence. And it's called an absolute because it is separate from the rest of the sentence. The rest of the sentence sounds fine without it. In English, you'd have something like, with that having been said, let's all go out to eat. So the first part, with that having been said, that's the absolute part. The rest of the sentence stands on its own. Let's all go out to eat. Okay, so what you'll be looking for in Latin is you'll be looking for things in the ablative case. In particular, you'll be looking for a participle. Now, in Latin, you can have a present active participle, or you can have a perfect passive participle. You could also have a future active participle and an ablative absolute, but let's not focus on that. Not as likely. Future passive you're going to see in another kind of construction. So you'll be looking for a present active or a perfect passive. So how are you going to recognize that? You'll recognize the perfect active because it comes from the second principal part, and the participles are going to be in the ablative case, and present active participles are like third declension. So you'll see if it's singular, it's going to end in E, the letter E, A, and if it's plural, it'll end in ibus. So that would be the participle. If it's perfect passive, it comes from the fourth principal part, or if it's deponent, it comes from the third principal part of the deponent. And the fourth principal part is declined like a first-second declension adjective. And so in the singular, the ablative endings would be a long A for feminine, long O for a masculine or neuter, and in the plural, it'll be IS. So those are all the endings you're going to be looking for. It's got to be one of those if it's part of an ablative absolute. So let's look at an example. Let's say we had Roma visa milites gaudebant. Okay, so let's say that this is our sentence that we are trying to translate. And we see that right at the beginning we've got something ablative. We see that the main part of the sentence stands on its own. The soldiers were rejoicing, the soldiers were happy, and we've got this Roma visa right at the beginning. So we look at visa. What verb does that come from? Video, videre, visi, visus, to see, or could be to seem. Here it is a perfect passive, so we see the first, second declension ending. And you translate an ablative absolute with this formula. Now, as you get better with it, more comfortable, you can translate it in a way that makes it make sense, sounds better to the American ear. But to start off with, it's best to use this formula with the noun, and if it's perfect passive, with the noun having been verbed. I'll explain that in a minute. That's for if it's perfect passive. And if it's present active, it'd be with the noun verbing. Okay, so in this particular example, we see Wisa, it's coming from the fourth principal part, so it's perfect passive. It'll be having been, with the noun having been verbed. So with Rome having been seen, the soldiers were being joyful. The soldiers were happy. Okay, we could also have a present active example as well, and that's way more time than I was supposed to spend.